It's a special weekend episode of Locked On Grizzlies. And for a special episode, I can't just fly solo on this thing. I can't just revel in the misery of Memphis Grizzlies basketball alone. Old friend of the show, former host of Locked On Grizzlies, Shawn Coleman, joining me to dissect Grizzlies Nuggets, looking ahead to Grizzlies Mavericks, and wondering how in the world did we get here? Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Again, welcome to a special weekend edition of Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host, Joe Mullinax. To Michael Cole, busy doing the day job as the Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. There's an important game, much less important now than it was, but still somewhat important, coming up on Sunday afternoon. So he is busy getting ready for that. I brought in the next best thing, and it is my friend, former host of this wonderful podcast, your pal, Shawn Coleman, here with me to talk on a weekend edition of the show. How are you doing, Shawn?
I'm doing all right. Trying to do all right. I'm going to be honest with you, Joe. I'm in sports hell right now. Braves are not doing good. Grizzlies are struggling. The Vols are the talk of the day across sports as well, though it seems like that there's a positive opinion overall, but just in general right now, it's not fun when it comes to sports. Hopefully that'll turn around soon, but good to be with you, sir. Always a pleasure talking with you, especially, most of the time about the Grizzlies.
The old ball coach in me, I do have a football background. I think the Vols are dodging a bullet, but we can talk more about that. This isn't Locked On Vols. I wouldn't feel as bad about that if I were you.
Agreed.
But that's another topic for another day. We're going to talk Memphis Grizzlies basketball here for the next 30 or so minutes. But before we get to that, I want to remind you that you can subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, literally anywhere you get podcasts. You can make to Michael and I and special guests like Shawn part of your NBA and Memphis Grizzlies content consumption each and every time that an episode drops, including these special weekend editions of the show. Make sure you're also going to our Locked On Grizzlies newsletter. I think we're number 6 or number 7 in the entire network right now, over 2,000 subscribers, which is fantastic. Thank you 1,000 times, 2,000 plus times to everybody that is subscribed to the newsletter already. Make sure you're going to lockedondaily.com. It's a free daily newsletter. Grizzlies words from me every weekday. It's a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed getting into the newsletter this year. Shout out to Locked On for continuing to expand the network and continuing to give us chances to talk, in this case, Grizzlies basketball. So lockedondaily.com, especially as the play-in approaches, you want to make sure you're subscribed there. Keyword there being play-in, right, Shawn Coleman? We now know that the Grizzlies are a play-in team. The playoffs are a thing of the past. It is important to point out, at least for the old head like me, if it were still the old school way of doing the playoffs, the Grizzlies would be a playoff team, right? They are locked into the 8th seed if it were the old way of doing things. But the old way is gone. And in fairness to the worst commissioner in sports, Adam Silver, this is one of his good things. The play-in tournament, I think it's hard to say, hasn't been a success. It pretty clearly has been a success. It's made these games mean more at the end of the regular season. So as much as it pains me, kudos to Adam Silver for the play-in. Memphis is in the play-in. They will take on, I believe, either the Minnesota Timberwolves or the Golden State Warriors. Maybe there's like a really random shot. It could be the Clippers, but it almost certainly will be the Warriors or the Timberwolves. If it's the Timberwolves, Memphis will host that game as the 7th seed. If it's the Warriors or the Clippers, in that outside chance, it will be out in California, which means it'll be the late game on Tuesday night, I believe, which means I'm going to have to stay up late. You know how cranky I get when I stay up late.
Go Jazz.
Yeah. We want the Jazz to beat the Timberwolves. Yes, That's exactly right. I will be cheering vehemently for them. But let's start off with this Nuggets game that took place on Friday night. And part of me, Shawn, wants to give them the benefit of the doubt, the Grizzlies being the them. The fact they got in at 4 a.m, the fact that they had played a tough game the night before, an emotional game at home the night before, they hung tough for a majority of the game. They were up by 15 points at one point on these Denver Nuggets. So if anything, it gives you hope going into this play-in experience, which, by the way, if you're looking for reasons to be positive, the Grizzlies kind of started off the play-in experience, right? They were literally the very first play-in game there in the bubble. They lost to the Trailblazers, but that was Ja Morant's rookie season, I think. And, the Grizzlies have a history with the play-in not being the most terrible thing for them. But the Denver Nuggets took it from the Grizzlies in the final few minutes of the fourth quarter, something like a 16-0 run or something along those lines, 16-2. and they just took it from them. And it's hard to be positive in the face of that. Desmond Bane making poor choices, trying behind the back passes, Jaren Jackson Jr. going dark in the worst possible moments. John Morant, as good as he's been, and he has been good, 8 for 21 from the field, not the most efficient scoring night for him. It just wasn't a game that you wanted to see, especially since it was so promising. And then the fourth quarter happens and Memphis loses the final frame 25-14. Very possible they just lost their legs there at the end, Shawn. But again, this is the time where you need to win these games, and the Grizzlies haven't been able to get that done literally at any point, from the Lakers game, the Isolo game, to many other possibilities. Memphis, just about every turn, when they've had a chance to win one of these biggest games of the regular season, they failed.
And last night was a bit different than it had been, recently, especially the night before. In the third quarter of Friday night's or Thursday night's game, the Grizzlies gave up the most points that they had in franchise history in a quarter, 52 to Minnesota. But last night, coming into last night in the Isolo era, ever since March 28th when he took over, the Grizzlies have allowed the most threes per game from opposing teams. But last night, they were able to hold Denver 1 from 15 from the field in the first half. But then you look at the scoreboard and you see that we're only up 6 points. And
that was bad. That was super bad.
Denver is going to catch back up at some point. They're either going to start hitting threes, which they really didn't. They were only 5 of 9 in the second half. But the big thing is that the best player on the court, best player in the NBA, Nikola Jokic, was going to eventually take over at some point. And once he did, the Grizzlies really had no answer. It probably did have something to do with the travel and the trip and all that different stuff. That is relevant in last night's performance. But last night, the Grizzlies needed their stars to be at their best, and they simply weren't. John Morant, who has been outstanding himself here recently, he struggled last night from the field. Desmond Bane had a pretty good night. Jaren Jackson Jr. was still a bit off, from what we're used to seeing from him. But last night was a needed performance from the Stars, especially the second half. It just was not there. So yes, that's a relevant factor. But to me, what was most discouraging about last night is that the defense actually held up their end of the bargain. The offense is what sputtered. Again, there are certainly obvious reasons out there, but in a game where you just really hope that you could, unexpectedly get it done, that they once again didn't. Only one win against a team over 500 since February 2nd. That is relevant, especially, for lack of a better way of putting it, limping into a potential playoff series.
And it's especially relevant limping into the play-in, right? Because they're going to play somebody in the play-in. And DeMichael and I will talk more about this, obviously, early on next week. They're going to play somebody in the play-in that has a winning record, right? In that 7-8 matchup. Now, thankfully, they're going to play somebody that's going to have a losing record if they lose that 7-8 matchup that they would host, that game for the 8th seed. We'll talk more about that in a moment here. But my biggest takeaway from the Denver Nuggets game was a reminder that this team, missing Jalen Wells is obviously a very important key piece to this. KJ Simpson kind of screwed the Grizzlies over a little bit at this point of the season. But it also is a reminder that if we're actually saying that sentence, that means something's gone horribly wrong in roster construction. And that context needs to continuously be brought up. It wasn't supposed to be Jalen Wells. It was supposed to be Marcus Smart, right? That's who that guy was supposed to be. And then after it wasn't Marcus Smart, it was supposed to be Vince Williams Jr. And Vince Williams Jr. only played 15 minutes against the Nuggets. And it was 1-5 from the field, 0 for 4, had a couple of bad turnovers, only 3 rebounds. He has not looked himself. So there's been multiple pieces to this that the roster is not strong enough to survive the dings against it that have occurred. And that is why, against teams like Denver, they're going to struggle and lose more often than not, and why they may be able to pick off a Sacramento or a Dallas in that 8 seed game, because those teams are also broken, whether it's Kyrie Irving being out for Dallas, the Kings obviously having their issues up and down their roster beyond their big 3 or 4, if you count Malik Monk, who may not be available for that game if it comes to that. It's just Memphis is what they are. They're able to beat up on bad teams and not win against good teams. And unfortunately, the playoffs, everybody's a good team except for maybe who you would see in that 8 seed play-in game.
Yeah, and they're they're a bad defensive team right now. I'll really quick go through this. At the trade deadline, we saw Marcus Smart, we saw Jake LaRavia traded away. Over the past few weeks, we've lost Brandon Clark and we've lost Jalen Wells, either theoretically or from what you've seen play out so far this season, that is 4 of your 5 or 6 best defenders. So the go-to guys that the Grizzlies usually relied on to help out their defense, they're not there anymore. When you take out those guys as options and you look at lineups that have played this year from the currently available Grizzlies, their defensive rating is 125. That would rank 28th in the NBA right now, Joe. Teams are shooting threes 41% of the time when it comes to their total shots against the Grizzlies, and they're making 42% of those threes. The Grizzlies, with Luke Kennard and Santi Aldama struggling, they're not going to be able to keep up with that. We saw that against Minnesota, for instance, last night. We saw that against Denver when we started jacking up so many threes that I'm a proponent of shooting threes, but if you don't have the shooting talent, you then need to go to higher percentage shots. And our ability to do that is struggling right now. So yes, you're exactly correct. I think that roster construction certainly plays a part in it, but also once again, we probably shouldn't have invested so much in young development. We got nothing from that. Vince, Gigi, as well as Jalen. Jalen's been great in his rookie year, but he's not there when we need him most now. We just don't have the defensive resources, and that has got to be a priority come this offseason.
Injuries and other things, again, context is important, but Gigi Jackson and Vince Williams Jr. being worse now than they were a calendar year ago is problematic. And it leads to the vibes being about as bad as they've been going into the postseason since 2016, when the Grizzlies got swept out of the playoffs as the 7th seed by the number 2 seed San Antonio Spurs. That game was that was where you might remember, I think, Chris Birdman Anderson and Lance Stevenson were on the team. And it was just a very broken season. The Grizzlies squeaked into the playoffs and they lost one game 94-68. Pretty wild stuff. And maybe we experience that again if the Grizzlies get into the postseason this time around. When Shawn and I come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, I posed a dealer's choice, a chance for folks to vent a little bit in my mentions, some topics to talk about here in the second segment. We're going to talk about that next here on the show. Stick around. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Upwork. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries: IT, AI, web development, marketing, you name it. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. If you need help with a marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivered incredible results. If you need help with cost-effective growth, you don't have to hire full-time. You can get affordable, top-tier freelancers to scale any business efficiently. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That is UPWORK.com, Upwork.com, to connect with top talent and grow your business today. What are you waiting for? Go check out Upwork.com right now. All right, Shawn. So I did some dealer's choice and I got some good feedback here. This is from me on X at Joe Mullinax. Obviously, we just talked about the Nuggets game briefly. I didn't talk as much about it because it makes me mad. We're going to preview Grizzlies Mavericks here in a moment, which is going to be sad to do because it's two very sad teams taking the playing game 82. But dealer's choice, a chance for folks to kind of steer the show for a moment. The first question I got was from J_5. This is J_X2TYMES on X. Grizzlies considering firing the GM. I just wanted to shout him out. I don't know that we have enough time in this segment to consider the future of Zach Kleiman here in Memphis. Asif Ahmed, and I apologize, Asif, as I mispronounced that, at ASIFDOC74. I'd love to dwell on why or how this same core is able to win clutch games against top competition 2 years ago, I'm guessing he's referencing, but has now lost it. Is it confidence, skill, regression, coaching, the supporting cast? Bane in particular has regressed in the clutch. We saw that firsthand, Shawn, at the end of the Nuggets game. I'll never forget that backwards pass that Bane made, very poorly made. And then Jamal Murray basically did the exact same thing, and it looked a heck of a lot better and actually led to a Denver bucket. How do you feel about that? For me, it's supporting cast. I do think that we have to remember that 2 years ago, Steven Adams was there, right? And Dylan Brooks was there. And that's not necessarily to say that those guys should still be in Memphis because, again, context matters. Dylan Brooks saw himself as a core piece that should be among the likes of Dez and Ja and Triple J. That's not the case. Steven Adams had a pretty serious injury and was not producing the way that you would have wanted him to. So, again, context matters, they might be doing better for the 2 seed Rockets than the Grizzlies currently are. But we do also have to be fair and point out that the two guys that are starters now next to the big three, one of them was Jalen Wells, a rookie who had hit the rookie wall pretty clearly going into his injury. The other one is another rookie, Zach Edey, who has looked better in the Tomas Isilo era, but at the same time still has his flaws as a big. Certainly not Brooks and Adams from 2 years ago.
I honestly think it's a trio of things. I think it's supporting cast, and I think this year especially, we just do not have shooting in the clutch. We have been one of, if not the worst, shooting teams in the clutch. Even when we had that stretch, Joe, from early January through mid-February, we were doing really good in the clutch. It was because of defense. It wasn't because of shooting. That's the second thing. Our defense has certainly fallen off as well. I know that many people want to see Zach Edey closing games. His rebounding can be helpful, but Brandon Clark was so good in his defensive versatility to end games. Without that, you've lost a big key component of why you were so successful in the clutch. And another thing that I think plays a part in this is that the question was posed about, how a couple of years ago the Grizzlies were really good in the clutch. Well, at that point, the league didn't really know much about Ja, Jaren, and Bane, how they would find success, or they didn't expect much from them. So maybe the prep wasn't there in the clutch, and the Grizzlies were able to find success. Well, we're now here 2 years later. The NBA, of course, is going to be able to adjust to what those guys do and what they do in the clutch. The continuity between those three, though, I think it's fine. But is it at the best that it could be? Probably not, because they haven't played as much together as you would like to see. So that may be a bit dramatic in terms of what's going on, but I think it's not necessarily that these guys can't get it done in the clutch. It's just that it feels like that the overall chemistry, execution, and an effective flow of the offense, especially in the clutch, has really fallen off. That's what occurred last night. That's kind of what is happening right now with this Grizzlies team. The defense in and of itself is bad. And then when the offense, unfortunately, which has been more middle of the league since, over the past month and top of the league, when it goes through what seems like that every game, 3 or 5 game stretch where we could score 2 or 3 points, we just can't get the stops to stay in games in the second half. Against Minnesota, it happened in the middle of the third quarter. Unfortunately, against Denver, it happened at the end of the fourth quarter. If that's going to happen every game, where we have that 3 to 5 minute stretch where we're not scoring and we can't get stops, it's going to be hard to beat good teams.
Absolutely. And then we also have from at Sportscape. I'm not going to read that handle because it's very complicated. Shout out to Sportscape for the question. You mentioned the offense a moment ago there. Sportscape asks about the implications of the Isilo offense and defensive adjustments. What have you noticed from him? I think he's 3-5 now in his 8 games as the interim head coach. I posted on X on Friday, I believe it was. I could be talked into Isilo, but anybody that thinks he's a slam dunk choice to be the head guy moving forward, I think that's crazy. I think that you have to have conversations. If you can get a Sam Cassell, if you can get a Terry Stotts, those would probably be the 2 names at the top of my list for this job. Somebody like that. But what are you taking away from Isilo so far? Again, Ja has looked more like Ja. I think we've seen Edey really kind of come into his own and do some things well. But, Jaren seems a little bit more timid, right? And Dez has been doing really well, but then he regresses in those key moments, especially as a facilitator. What's your takeaway on TI so far there, Shawn?
Yeah, I think that a lot of it has to do with personnel. I just think that Isilo, he's not in a fair situation, and I think that is irrelevant. I don't think that in and of itself means that the Grizzlies should give him a fair shake automatically next year. I'm with you. I want experience in that head coaching seat, someone that has had success getting through the playoffs multiple times. That's what I'd love to see. That's why I'm an advocate for at least talking with Mike Malone eventually. But the point that I'm getting at is that I feel with Isilo, I again think it's personnel, but defensively, again, giving up more threes. Now we're giving up 6 more threes per game than we did under Taylor Jenkins. I think that is going to burn us more often than not, because teams are going to continue to find those good threes. And it's wonderful that Ja is playing well. Again, I've mentioned it several times. He's in the second best scoring stretch of his career. You want him playing well to go into the playoffs. That's one of the best aspects of this team, to give us a puncher's chance. But the other thing that, again, kind of goes with personnel, you've seen Santi and Luke fall off so much. And if Isilo does not, and without Jalen Wells, the efficiency of Brandon Clark at times, it's so hard to be able to find success offensively in today's NBA if you really only have one reliable shooter. And that's what the Grizzlies are playing with right now. You only have really Desmond Bane who's shooting well. Josh shot a bit better, but he's not been elite. You've got to unlock Santi and Luke once again when it comes to this offense. I think ECLO has kind of struggled a bit in getting Luke going some. Him not playing against Minnesota the other night. I know I'm a Luke advocate, and I know we didn't seem like we needed him, but he could have been a big benefit to our bench. You've got to unlock the shooting, and if you don't unlock the shooting, you just are limiting yourself so much to find success. Your ceiling is so much lower. So I don't really have I think the opinion on ECLO is incomplete because of the situation he's in, but I agree with you. I haven't seen anything from him that makes it clear he should be the choice going forward.
And I want to shout out Joseph Iverson at Joseph Iverson 13 on X. I asked about how we can win the first play-in game. I think a lot of the things that Shawn just said certainly can apply there. And of course, stick around with us here on Locked On Grizzlies heading into that first play-in game. Again, I do believe it will be Tuesday, if I recall correctly. I have to start paying attention to the play-in schedule now. And I'm sure it'll be the late game because Memphis will almost certainly, even if they're not traveling to the West Coast, they will, they'll play the East Coast game first, I would imagine. So unless it's West and then East, I haven't been paying attention. I need to look up the play-in schedule. I'll do that here in a bit. But first, we got to get through this season. We got to get through the regular season, and the Grizzlies played the Mavericks in game 82 out of 82. I'm not sure who is necessarily excited about that at this stage. Feels very deflating, but it does still carry significance if Memphis wants any hope of still potentially hosting that play-in game. They have to win this one. It's a big one. We'll talk about it next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Stick around. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's pretty easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. They're your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop managing your money and start actually building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. I love chicken wings, Shawn Coleman. I don't know if you do, but I'm a big chicken wing guy. What used to spend way too much money on those chicken wings. Now I budget smarter and I save more. You know who's really a big fan of that? My wife, the missus. Managing money with my partner is smoother than ever before. Tracking shared and personal accounts, setting goals, staying on the same page without the stress. It's going to help your relationship even. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's an amazing amount. That's a great deal. monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. Go check them out. All right, Shawn, Grizzlies Mavericks coming up on Sunday. Again, we're recording this on Saturday afternoon. Memphis is favored as of this moment by about 5.5 points. Sounds about right. I think that would make a lot of sense for the Grizzlies to be in that mix. Obviously, lots of guys could be in or out of the game for both teams. I would imagine Memphis is going to play their dudes. Spencer Dinwiddie did not play on Friday for the Mavericks against the Raptors. Dallas picked up the win in that game. So that's probably the one to keep an eye on for them. I didn't see anything that happened in Grizzlies Nuggets that would suggest that there would be an absence for Memphis. What are you seeing going into this last game? Again, if Memphis has any hope of being the 7 seed, hoping that Minnesota loses to Utah, as you alluded to there, Shawn, for that to occur, there has to be a position where the Grizzlies have to win this game. So I don't see them saying, oh, we're going to rest these guys. That's not going to be the way they go about this. And it's important to point out, I was talking about earlier, Golden State or the Clippers. Those are two teams that are playing each other on Sunday, right? That's an ESPN game. So that's one of the reasons it's pretty much to avoid the play-in as well, depending on what happens with Minnesota, the winner of that contest. That's a big one going on at the exact same time that Grizzlies Mavs is. So looking at this game, Shawn, how do you feel? Do you think Memphis is going to be able to find a way to kind of get themselves up for this last game? It's a home crowd, a Sunday matinee. You would think it's fan appreciation. They do that every year. Do you feel like there's a potential for this to be a negative experience where the energy is not where it needs to be? Or do you think Memphis kind of rallies behind these guys and gives them a little bit of a jolt to at least put them in a position, if they go out west for the play-in first round, it won't be because they lost this game?
Absolutely. And I also think that this is a game that sets up well for Memphis. Just if they play within themselves, they can get the job done. Dallas right now, over the past month and a half, is averaging 33 attempts per game, and they're shooting 34% from three. In the ECLO era, which has been the past basically 3 weeks, Memphis is attempting 12 more threes per game than Dallas. So a big key for me is finding early success from three. Now, Dallas, I haven't looked at this in particular yet. Dallas can still be pretty decent at guarding the three, but if you can find success from three, I think that you're going to put yourself in a good position. However, two other things have to occur. Dallas has Anthony Davis. I believe that he had a triple-double in the game against the Raptors.
Correct. And Anthony Davis usually fillets the Memphis Grizzlies,
yes,
if I remember correctly.
There is typically, when Anthony Davis is playing on the court, he is the best player. That game, that series 2 years ago when we played the Lakers in the 22-23 season, I know they had LeBron. The story of that whole series was Anthony Davis. He was the best player on the court. He cannot be. If he wants to be the best player on the court tomorrow, that's fine. But we need to have the second, third, and fourth best players on the court. He could not far and away be the best player on the court. That's the second thing. Shoot threes early, beat them significantly in the three-point production. Make sure Anthony Davis is by far the best player. And the other big thing for me, where Dallas can make up for the lack of threes that they'll be shooting, is those offensive rebounds. Because if I'm correct, I believe that they've got PJ Washington, AD, Lively, and Gafford all healthy right now. That is going to mean that you're going to get 48 minutes of hell to try and get offensive rebounds. Make sure that they don't get those extra looks. If you can help contain them from three and have success yourself, but then you wind up losing the overall possession battle or shot battle by 12 to 15 shots, it does no good. So we've got to be able to position ourselves for rebounds. We've got to be able to find good looks from three. Getting Luke and Santi going would be a huge boost, not only for tomorrow, but for the playoffs. So in the three-point battle significantly, make sure Anthony Davis isn't far and away the best player, and make sure you're positioning to limit their offensive rebounds. If you can do those three things, I think you find yourself in a good position to win.
Yeah, the Toronto Raptors only got out-rebounded by 1. Or excuse me, I read that wrong. No, they got out-rebounded by 14. Yeah, so Dallas is a much better rebounding team probably than the Grizzlies because of all the size that they have. I think that's an important point to make. So Dallas can definitely dominate the glass. That can't be a thing. However, something that is promising, again, if you're looking for reasons to be optimistic going into this game, players like Garrett Temple. You remember Garrett Temple? Shout out Garrett Temple. Still surprised he's still in the league. 12 points off the bench for the Raptors. AJ Lawson, 12 points off the bench for the Raptors against Dallas on Friday. That tells me that there's opportunity for guys like Asante Aldama, like a Luke Kennard. Scotty Barnes and Ochai Agbaji both had really good games, especially Agbaji. 24 points on 12 shots, right? So playing a similar position to what Desmond Bane does. The Mavericks are going to be big, and they're going to throw big bodies at you. But who in the world is their point guard? You've got Anthony Davis, PJ Washington, Najee Marshall, Derek Lively, and Klay Thompson were the starters against the Raptors. Does that make Klay Thompson the point guard for the Dallas Mavericks? I'm genuinely asking. And if that's the case, who the hell is defending John Morant?
Yeah.
So Dallas is in trouble as well. That's important to point out. And the big versus small dynamic, the backcourt of Memphis against the front court, admittedly, obviously Jaren is having a great year. Edey has done better. I think it'd be foolish to say that Memphis has the advantage in the front court in this one. But just as foolish as that would be, I think it's foolish to say that Dallas has the backcourt advantage, because the Grizzlies, especially with the way Scottie Pippen Jr. has been playing, that's an important key to this game. I think he's an X factor, because for Dallas, you're talking about guys like Caleb Martin. You're talking about Dante Exum. Max Christie has obviously done some good things coming over in that trade. But again, the guard play of Memphis is going to be so significant in this contest, trying to cancel out what Dallas is doing. And you made a great point there to start off this conversation, Shawn. Threes are greater than twos. It might be one of those times where that math might actually benefit Memphis.
Absolutely. And that's the whole key, right? Because, what has struggled with Santi and Luke struggling, and with the fact that, you've got Vince now playing, with the starters, is that besides Scottie Pippen Jr., you have not had a consistent producer off the bench in weeks. You just haven't. So tomorrow is a really good opportunity. I've mentioned it, a few times, and I know that people, it's true. If Santi and Luke are not shooting, and not shooting well, it limits their value. That's absolutely the case. But it also, at this point, with the Grizzlies having lost some significant talents, there's no other way for the Grizzlies to be at their best than with Santi and Luke playing well. So if you can have them have a good game tomorrow night, give them some chances to have a good game tomorrow, and then that could potentially give them a boost to go into the play-in, and say you wind up winning the 7th seed. In my opinion, it's shown this year, if Santi and Luke are shooting well in a potential series matchup with Houston, that's a big boost for this Memphis team. So again, for anyone, and I know the Grizzlies locker room wants this, for anyone who's looking to make the most out of this season still, Luke and Santi are the route in which you go about doing that. They can show up big tomorrow night. And if that could be a boost going into the play-in and maybe even the playoffs, that'll be huge. But yes, finding success from 3 early, I think is going to be a big, big boost to the Grizzlies if they can do that.
I think it's a game where you consider starting Santi at the 3 because of how big Dallas is in the front court. And I think it's a game where you consider playing Gigi Jackson. In the limited reps he's gotten in the Isolo era, he's done well rebounding. He's shown some strength there at times. You have to match that size with size at some point. And I do think that that's going to be a fascinating chess match. A good test, Jason Kidd versus Isolo in tomorrow's game. Thank you guys so much for being with us on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Obviously, the next time that we are together, it'll be DeMichael and I post Grizzlies Mavs on Monday, talking with you about the play-in. All the matchups will be set. We'll be able to have all that locked in for you. See what I did there, Shawn? And we'll be talking through that, getting you ready for the play-in, and whether Memphis is heading out to Cali or they're getting ready for a home game. That would be pretty cool. Lots of things that we'll be able to dive into on Monday. Shawn, thank you so much for being with us on this episode. It is truly appreciated. Shawn texted me and said, I want to talk Grizzlies basketball. And there's not many people that are better than talking Grizzlies basketball, or better at talking Grizzlies basketball than Shawn Coleman. So Shawn, thank you so much for hanging out with me, buddy. It's appreciated.
Yes, sir. Always a pleasure. My best to DeMichael. Hope that y'all have plenty of content to enjoy for the rest of this season, which I hope. You know what? Again, I point this out, and this will be the last thing that I'll say. They said when Jalen Wells' injury came out that he's likely out for the rest of the season. He's likely out for the rest of the season. That means he could still come back. Let's give him a reason to, no matter how believable you think that possibility is or not. Joe, always a pleasure. Thanks for having me, sir.
So you're telling me there's a chance.
Always.
Right? So you're telling me there's a chance. Speaking of content here from us at Locked On Grizzlies, the play-in race now for Memphis is heating up. The Kings are not the Kings. The Grizzlies, I was thinking about the Kings as a potential play-in opponent. The Grizzlies are locked into the play-in. Stay in the know with Locked On Grizzlies and our newsletter as well. Getting a chance to win one of these amazing prizes by subscribing: a $2,500 Best Buy gift card, a $300 Game Time gift card, or a $200 Fanatics gift card. Those are all possibilities. If you subscribe and sign up between now and April 30th, you get entered into this drawing. Our Grizzlies newsletter delivers real-time updates, expert analysis, and play-in and hopefully playoff insights tailored for you. Subscribe now for free to the Locked On Grizzlies podcast newsletter and stay ahead as the season unfolds. Subscribe today. Click on the link in the description to enter. Again, thank you to Shawn. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing wherever you get your podcasts. DeMichael and I will be with you on Monday, bright and early as always, getting ready for the play-in. Will it be in Memphis? Will it be in California? Who will the Grizzlies be playing? And so much more. Stay locked in with us, and we'll catch you next time on Locked On Grizzlies.